All right, welcome everybody to this March 7th Monday meeting of the Yakima School District Board of Directors. So you can find, so we are live streaming this meeting. You can find the link on our website under Find It Fast or going directly to ysd7.org/board meetings. And Barb, if you would please call roll.
Yes. Mr. Beckett?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
I'm here.
Mr. Navarro Jr.?
Here.
And Vice President Villanueva?
Here.
And President Rice is absent.
We have a student with us, a fourth grader from Robertson, Analia Mejia, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And we have Principal Newell here to introduce her. So I will kick it over to Principal Newell.
Yes, thank you. I'm super excited to introduce Analia Mejia. She's a fourth grader in Miss Guzman's classroom. And myself being new to Robertson this year and getting to know the students, something that stood out to me with Analia is that her favorite subject is math. So we made an immediate connection. And so now we, talk math and algebra all day long. And so I'm super excited to turn it over to Analia Mejia.
Hey.
Hi everybody, my name is Analia, and I'm very excited to be here. So if you guys can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Analia. The board always really likes having students here joining our meeting and leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The board members might have a question for you, and so I will call on each person and they'll ask you a question. And let's start with Director Navarro, please.
Yes, I'm Raymond. Nice to meet you. I just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us and for your leadership and leading the Pledge of Allegiance. I guess my question, what other interests do you have in addition to math?
Well, I like to do multiplication a lot and division and anything that has to do with solving problems. I really like that.
Yeah. Are you planning to be like an engineer or architect or?
Yeah, kind of.
All right. Well, thank you again, and we wish you the best of luck in your future. So thank you. Nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Director Beckett.
Hi, Analia. My name is Ryan, and I don't really have any questions, but I just want to say thank you so much for being here. And I want you to know that we hope you have an awesome rest of your year at Robertson. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Director Walker.
Hi, Analia. I'd also like to thank you for being here. I always have a question or two, but today I'd like to know what you like to read when you're reading for fun.
I like to read Bad Kitty and Dogman because I like the pictures in the illustrator. They do a very good job.
Oh, okay, so you like books that have illustrations to go with them.
Yeah, they're very funny.
So do I. I have some books like that too. So I keep on reading. That's a really important skill to have.
Yep.
Analia, my name is Graciela. Thank you so much for being here. You did a very good job leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's see here. What questions should I ask you? What is your favorite thing about being back in the classroom and not having to do remote learning anymore?
My favorite thing is probably that I get to learn easier because I'm actually in person and we're doing more things than what we did online.
Cool. Well, we're very happy that we're able to have everyone back in the school building too. So thank you so much for being here. We have other things, agenda items to talk about in our meeting. So you can stay if you want to, but you could also leave the meeting if you want to. That would be okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Analia. The next item on our agenda is the Yakima land acknowledgement, and Director Navarro will be reading that today.
Yes, thank you, Graciela. Today, the schools of the Yakima School District rest on the ancestral lands of the 14 Confederate tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. The people of the Yakima Nation inhabited more than 12 million acres across Adams, Benton, Chelan, Douglas, Franklin, Grant, Kittitas, Klickitat, and Yakima counties. Today, we honor those Native peoples who are tied to the land through history, legends, and culture. We acknowledge their descendants who live in the world today. We thank the caregivers of this land who have lived here and continue to live here since time immemorial. An acknowledgement is a simple, powerful way to show respect and a step towards correcting the stories and the practices that erase Indigenous peoples' history and culture. It also honors the truth. As a school district, we will continue to build upon our relations with the Yakima Nation. Thank you.
Next on our agenda is acknowledgement of accomplishments and recognition. We have 2 items today: the School Retirees Appreciation Week proclamation and the Education Support Professionals Week proclamation. Director Walker, I will ask you to please read the School Retirees Appreciation proclamation. And Director Beckett, if you would please read the Education Support Professionals Week proclamation. We'll start with the School Retirees proclamation.
Okay, this is from the state of Washington proclamation. Whereas the Washington State School Retirees Association recognizes all retired school employees, and whereas the WSSRA educates and assists retirees in meeting the special challenges retirement brings and works to improve their general welfare, and whereas the WSSRA aids in advancing education by supporting high educational standards, and whereas the WSSRA promotes group and individual involvement in charitable projects and activities, sponsors scholarships, and maintains interest and participation in educational and community activities. And whereas the WSSRA supports and encourages retired educators to remain active in the education profession through volunteer activities associated with learning. Now, therefore, I, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim March 21st through 27th, 2022 as School Retirees Appreciation Week in Washington. And I encourage all people in our state to join me in this special observance, signed this 15th day of December, 2021, Governor Inslee.
Thank you, Director Walker. Our retiree association and our local groups contribute a lot to our programming, and we appreciate their help. Director Walker, please. Or I'm sorry, Director Beckett for the next proclamation.
A proclamation from the state of Washington. Whereas education support professionals are involved in nearly every aspect of education, maintaining buildings and grounds, preparing and serving meals, keeping school facilities clean and orderly, assisting in the classroom, providing over 60% of all instructional hours to special education, English language learners, and opportunity gap students, performing and conducting research activities, providing information technology and media services, administrative support functions, and safe transportation, creating a secure and healthy environment, and many other specialized services. And whereas more than 62,000 education support professionals work with and help students in Washington's universities, colleges, and public schools are the backbone of our public education system and deserve recognition and thanks for the outstanding work they do for this state and their communities. And whereas education support professionals are instrumental in fulfilling the state's responsibility to educate all students, and by supporting the learning environment, they serve as crucial partners with teachers, parents, administrators, and school boards. Therefore, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, does hereby proclaim March 14 through 18, 2022 as Education Support Professionals Week in Washington and encourages all people in our state to join him in this special observance.
Thank you, Director Beckett. Our education support professionals really are the folks who allow learning to happen in the classrooms and in the school buildings. So thank you to each of our educational support professionals for all the work that they do to make learning possible for our teachers and our students. Next on the agenda is a donation from Parker Youth and Sports Foundation. Is somebody here from that organization to kick this off, or Superintendent Green, anything beyond?
Just in absence of seeing anybody from the organization, Director Villanueva, I would simply acknowledge that the Parker Youth and Sports Foundation always looks for opportunities to serve our community, and certainly the district is part of that in a big way. And we thank them for their 2,000 donations to the Davis High School girls wrestling team.
The next item, I'm sure the Davis High School girls wrestling team is grateful for this donation. Parker Youth and Sports, from the Parker Youth and Sports Foundation. Next is board reports. A report of the month is the Migrant Education and Native Education Report, and Dr. Ellis. Do you want to kick this off, Superintendent Green?
I'd be happy to. It's just amazing the way that some things, the stars align and bless you with tremendously gifted individuals, especially as of late that have come into our district, many of which are here on the screen right now. I certainly want to acknowledge Dr. Charlotte Ellis, who has come to us and not only assumed a position that puts her in a great position providing guidance, evaluations, but more rightly so support for our secondary principals. And as a gift of everything that she has to do with principals, we also gave her additional responsibilities that fell into the area of migrant education and Native education, of which she has just very gracefully addressed in this time of extreme change for her coming into our district. So I'm so grateful to have her as part of our team. And I think for even a better introduction or a little bit more information, I would pass it to Dr. Rodriguez to share a little bit more. Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Superintendent Green. We are very blessed to have Dr. Ellis with us. She's truly known across our state as being an expert in supporting migrant students and building systems of support birth to 21. So she really puts no barriers on who we will serve amongst our migrant students. And so I'm excited for you to hear from her directly tonight about the work that is happening in that program, as well as the next steps we'll be taking as we move into the next year. She also has been doing work around Native education, although those responsibilities have now been transferred over to Deputy Superintendent Darling. So Dr. Ellis will give us the update, and then next year I think you'll hear from Dr. Darling on that particular topic. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Ellis.
Wow, those are really big expectations to live up to, so I hope I do. Good afternoon, Board Vice President Villanueva, Superintendent Green, and distinguished members of the board. It is my pleasure to provide you with an update on our migrant and Native Ed programs. My goal is to provide helpful information and answer any questions that you may have. However, I do recognize that we do have a short time together and that I may not be able to showcase all of the complexities of these two programs. So please know that I'm always happy and available to provide more details or context outside of our time this afternoon. So we're going to begin with our Migrant Ed program. As was mentioned, I'm new to the Yakima School District and have previous experience working with the Migrant Ed programs in other parts of the state. So at the very beginning of the year, I brought our Migrant Ed team together and we developed our purpose statement, or our why statement. And our why statement is that we, the Migrant Education Program staff, we believe all migrant families value education. we will remove barriers so that our families are resilient and hopeful. We felt really strongly that we needed to develop a why statement so we could be grounded in the work that we do, and we use this as we make programming decisions with our families. So embedded in our why are the 3 primary goals of the migrant education program. First one is to provide supplementary educational programs and health services to our migrant students, provide special programs that are designed to meet the unique needs of our migrant kids, and coordinate activities and services with similar school programs. Each of these goals have measurable program outcomes that are used to evaluate the effectiveness of our service delivery model and our program services. These are 4 fast facts about the migrant program. I wanted to make sure that if you ever got caught in a situation at a WASDA meeting or stuck in an elevator with an OSPI official and they asked you about your migrant program, that you would be able to recall 4 facts about them. There's not gonna be a quiz or anything, so don't feel like you have to write these down. But first and foremost, the Migrant Ed is funded through a federal grant. Our grant award for this school year was $1.5 million. Yakima typically, on average, is the 2nd largest migrant program in the state of Washington. And the top qualifying activities that bring our families to the Yakima School District include picking cherries, picking and thinning apples. Again, there's no quiz, so we can go back to that if you want to. The most frequent question that our staff receives is around eligibility. How does a student qualify for migrant services? Well, the process begins when one of our 3 recruiters receives notification that a family has enrolled into our district and has indicated on the enrollment form that they have moved to Yakima School District to work in agriculture, fishing, or for personal subsistence. Once the recruiter receives this information, they make contact with the family to see if the other eligibility criteria is met. And those include, is the child under the age of 22? Do they qualify for free and reduced lunch? And did they make a move for or with a qualified migrant worker? If those are all answered yes, then we work on column number 2, as you'll see. Was the move for economic reasons? Was it across school district boundaries? Was it from one residence to another? And again, did the family or worker engage in qualifying work for seasonal or temporary agriculture, fishing, or for personal subsistence? If all of those boxes are marked, then the child and family receive a certificate of eligibility, which then allows us to provide them supplemental services through the Yakima School District. Once the child is identified as migrant, they qualify for 3 years. So once that process is determined, we have eligible students. So our current enrollment at our elementary schools is 567 migrant students, with Adams, Garfield, and MLK our largest elementary sites. As you can see on the slide, there is a column labeled PFS, which stands for Priority for Service. I will provide some more details around what exactly that means for those students in a couple more slides. Our current secondary enrollment is 609. Again, you'll notice on this slide, there's a column identified for Priority for Service students, as well as a row entitled Out of School or OSY. Because migrant services can be provided until the age of 21, we seek to re-engage migrant students who have been disenrolled in school to complete their education. We connect them with transitional programs as HEP, ALEs, or other educational resources to help them complete diplomas or certifications. Again, as Dr. Rodriguez mentioned, we believe in birth to 21 in our program. That brings us to a total enrollment of 1,501 kiddos, with 751 of them identified as Priority for Service students. So the migrant service delivery model has many facets and many moving parts. I tried to condense it as much as I could for our presentation today. So to begin with, migrant students are prioritized by their academic needs and growth towards achieving academic standards. Students who are identified as having these three indicators are considered priority for service, or PFS. So if a student is at risk or most at risk of failing to meet state standards, if their education has been interrupted during the academic school year, or miss a significant amount of school due to the migrant's lifestyle, they are categorized as PFS. Our staff is committed to providing services to all migrant students. However, we provide more intensive support to those students who are considered priority for service, or PFS. A cornerstone of the migrant service delivery model is our PAC, or our Parent Advisory Council. These are families who meet with our team and our family engagement supervisors about every 8 weeks to advise us on how best to serve migrant families. We discuss current issues and concerns. The PAC council meetings are very similar to our school board meetings and formats. We have officers, we have motions, we provide reports, we talk about budget allocation, and all of the other things that are related to schooling that impact our migrant kids. Another component of our service delivery plan is our migrant student advocates, who work directly with our migrant students at the school sites. We currently have 19 migrant student advocates from elementary to high school. The advocates track academic success indicators, communicate concerns, and remove barriers for the students and their families. They are the connectors within the organization for many of our migrant families and ensure that our school staff have the needed information to best support our migrant kiddos. We are very fortunate. We are one of few across the state who have a partnership with OSPI and our YSD Health Services Department, which supports the funding for a full-time migrant nurse who is dedicated to serving just our 1,501 migrant kiddos. As you can guess, due to their migratory lifestyle, having access to regular healthcare and health-related resources can be a challenge. Our families are incredibly thankful to know that they can count on our migrant nurse to bridge the gap and to remove barriers for our families. Even as simple as getting their immunization records from one state to another, our migrant nurse has the resources and the ability to do that, so we can get our kiddos enrolled in school quickly. I just wanted to highlight the picture. Oh, go back, Barb, sorry. The picture that you see here. This is a photo from our health fair that we had in early December. And this is a great example of all of our parts of our service delivery plan coming together. The idea to put on this health resource fair came from a PAC board meeting. They brought the concern to us. We then coordinated with our migrant nurse, who then coordinated with our health services department. The event was staffed by our advocates and our family community engagement supervisors, and was incredibly well attended. We provided COVID vaccines, flu vaccines. We provided access to community partnerships with critical resources for our families, and we were even able to have pictures taken with Santa Claus, and that was the cutest thing ever. So again, as mentioned, our PAC board is heavily involved in our service delivery model. And after reviewing data, we engaged in conversations around how do we best increase and deepen our services to students and our families. So in order to do this, we looked at other effective service delivery models across the state. And the decision was made to add certificated migrant graduation specialists at both Ike and Davis in the fall. We also will be adding an early learning advocate who will be focusing on our birth to 5 migrant students and working with our elementary schools to infuse arts into after-school academic supports. Again, looking to bridge those gaps and remove those barriers for our kiddos. That's the first part of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any migrant ed specific questions at this time, or I can wait and do it at the very end.
Any questions from board members?
I just have one quick question, maybe.
Yeah.
Dr. Ellis, you mentioned at one point that, and I'm going back to that migrant education fast facts, the 4 points for our elevator conversation. You mentioned that a student is qualified for 3 years. I'm just curious, is the grant, the federal grant, a multi-year grant, or is it something that has to be reapplied for each year? How do we handle the financing on that?
Great question. It's a yearly grant that we apply for, and the funding is actually a 2-year, based on enrollment from 2 years previous. So, so I apply for it every fall, and it's, again, the award of the grant is based on 2 years of our previous enrollment. So it's super important that my recruiters are actively ensuring that we're making contact with families and ensuring that they have made another qualifying move, so then we can make them eligible again for the next 3 years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions as well. Dr. Ellis, you'd mentioned that you'll be adding a migrant graduation specialist next year. Can you help me understand how the roles are different, how the migrant graduation specialist role is different than the migrant student advocate role?
Absolutely. So the migrant student advocate is a classified position, and through grant language, they can serve up to 150 students on their caseload. And that role is not designed to be the primary delivery model for PFS students because they carry so many kids on their caseload. The graduation specialist is a certificated individual who either has a counseling background or a social work background, and their caseload is only 50. So they will be able to serve intensely 50 priority for service students. Their expertise are truly around working with other graduation specialists across the state, so they can engage in those conversations, such as this student from, I'll just pick a school district, Pasco, left mid-quarter and they didn't get their full credit. That student comes to now Eisenhower. Those two graduation specialists will be able to communicate to figure out how we can work to have that student earn that other half of that credit without having to start their entire class over again. There's a very strong network of graduation specialists in the state who have spent a lot of time calibrating transcripts, courses, things of that nature, again, to ease that transition. And it's really going to be, and I'm sorry I get super excited about it because it is one of my passions of my life, but it's going to be they're going to be able to enter Iker Davis, and that person's going to meet him and go, oh, I just spoke to, Claudia Cerna from Chiawana High School. I hear this is all about you, so let's get you started right away. So we're really trying to lessen that gap between when they leave a high school into a new high school. And because of the smaller caseload, the graduation specialist is going to be able to do that.
Okay, that's actually a good lead into my next question around how a student's transcript or records are able to follow them when they transfer to a new school, both inside the state and outside of Washington State. You talked about a network. Is that a formal network?
Yeah, there's two pieces. There is the traditional enrollment process where they would request a record from whatever school they came from, that just typically a normal non-migrant student experiences. So like that's layer number one. The second part of that is we do have a migrant database. It's called MSIS that also houses key information that the advocates and graduation specialists and people in my office have access to, that also contains valuable information that will help that transition. And then this informal connection between the graduation specialists is also really powerful, because what we're able to do is we're actually able to track where our kids come from. So a lot of our kids come from Mattawa. That's our #1 feeder. So we need to build that relationship with Mattawa School District. So we automatically know they send us a list. These are the kids who typically come at this time of year, and we can, onboard them even before they get here to bridge that gap. So there's not like, I don't know where Eisenhower is. I don't know anybody at Eisenhower. They're going to be able to walk in and be like, boom, I'm your graduation specialist. I already know everything about you. Let's get you going, get you ready to be successful here in Yakima.
And then my last question, thank you for that. My last question is around, I guess it would be maybe seniors in high school or anybody who maybe is in the school district. I think a few years ago, maybe there was discussion around a graduation packet, like paper-based packets that my students would receive to complete their coursework. Does that paper packet still exist? Are we able to use technology to better accommodate our students' needs?
Yes, that we refer to those as pass packets. And it is, I'm gonna like check my bias about it, because it is, it's not necessarily best practices given the technology that we have. When I started in the migrant program 25 years ago, it was my very first teaching job, and I did pass packets, and 25 years ago it made sense. So yes, those packets do exist. What we prefer to do is access like GradPoint or other online options for our kids. Now that we have technology, now that we're one-to-one devices, the use of Canvas, our kids can, under certain circumstances, still stay connected with their teacher who they have a relationship with. Pass is always an option, but it's not best practice anymore. And I'll stop there.
And so does that mean that the student has a choice? They can choose a pass packet, or they could choose another system. I think you said GradPoint as an example.
Yes. We work really closely with the high school counselors, particularly, to figure out if pass is really the best option for them, because it is self-directed. It's not, there is no teacher on the other end working with them through the process, where with an online course, we can connect them with a teacher, with an adult to support them through there. Depending on the circumstances, sometimes pass is the only option. Our families may be in an area where they don't have access to internet or reliable connection. So the pass packet makes best sense in those situations, but it's not our preferred method. We want our migrant kids to be connected to the adults in the system. We want them to have somebody who they can call when they get stuck, somebody to check on them and teach them.
Well, thank you. I'm always, each year, or however often we hear this presentation, I'm always impressed to hear about all of the support services that are available to our migrant students. I think I've shared this story before, but my mom has shared with me that when she completed 9th grade 3 times. Her family was a migrant family, and she completed 9th grade in California, again in Oregon, and again in Washington. And it wasn't for it wasn't that she didn't pass the class. It was just that there was no way for records to be transferred, and had a huge desire in working with migrant families back in those days. And so it's wonderful, really, that we're able to provide these additional support services for our migrant kids so that they are able to be successful.
Yeah, because that's exactly what we can't have. We've got to ensure that they're transferring from school to school to school, and that process is streamlined, and that there is no barrier. And again, I apologize, I get a little passionate about it, so I'm gonna check myself.
Your passion. Any other questions for Dr. Ellis regarding migrant education before we move on to Native education?
Yes, yes, thank you. I don't think I see it in the presentation, but is there any data that our current data on performance, academic performance, or can you summarize that very quickly on how they're doing compared to other student groups?
Yeah, for 1920, our graduation rate was 82%, which was on average with our non-migrant students. And then I'll just throw these fast facts at you super fast. 34 of our migrant kids were enrolled in an IB, an AP, or college in the high school or running start. 84% of our kids received services, and 77% were enrolled in classes where credit towards graduation was obtained. And so that's district-wide, but I can provide you specific around ELA, SBAC data, whatever you would like, I'm happy to do. I just didn't include it in this presentation today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ellis. I think we can move on now to the Native education program, please.
Okay, so as Dr. Rodriguez highlighted, I got to be the overseer of the Native Ed program for a little while, and then I've handed it off to Dr. Darling, but I did ask him if I could do this part of the presentation as like my final part. So, as you know, the Native Ed program is another integral part of ensuring equitable services and opportunities for our Native students in YSD. The Native Ed program has 3 overarching goals, and that is to ensure Native students gain knowledge and understanding of Native communities, languages, tribal histories, traditions, and cultures. That the program meets the unique educational and culturally related academic needs of our Native students, and to ensure that all the staff who serve Native students have the ability to provide culturally appropriate and effective instruction and supports for our Native kiddos. Here's your fast facts for your elevator speech. The Native Ed program is also funded through a federal grant. For the 2021-22 school year, our award was $93,000. We currently serve 526 Native students, of which 264 are tribally enrolled. And then Yakima, Colville, and Blackfoot are our top 3 tribal affiliations. So students are identified as Native in the Yakima School District. Again, when they fill out their enrollment package, there is a portion of there that they can select tribal affiliation. Once they do that, we receive notification here in our office. All students who indicate tribal affiliation receive support through our Native Ed program. And then students who provide tribal enrollment or documentation through a certificate of Indian blood or letter of Indian ancestry, they also receive additional financial support for school-related costs, such as school supplies, through our partnership with our local tribal agency, Johnson O'Malley. So we currently have 526 students enrolled with tribal affiliations, meaning they've indicated on their enrollment papers that they are affiliated with a tribe. And 264 of those are tribal enrolled, meaning that they've provided that additional documentation. 89 of our 264 are tribally enrolled with the Yakima Nation. I do just want to take a moment to highlight the young lady that you see in the photo here. This is one of our Native students. Her name is Morgan Green, who, as you can see, is an incredibly talented artist who was commissioned by a family from the West Side to produce this Native art piece. Morgan will also be starting a new tradition this year by developing an art piece that will be reproduced and given to each of our graduating Native seniors at a special ceremony we will be hosting in June. And she's a super sweet girl, just side note. Mariah Lowe's is very well known in our Native communities and is foundational to our service delivery model. Mariah is our Native education liaison who works with the schools, the students and families to remove barriers for our Native students so they can experience an equitable education. She knows the historical and family connections of about every one of our Native families. My very first meeting with her this summer, it was mind blowing. She knows everyone's great grandfather down to the cousins that, you know, live in the neighboring town. She's just a wealth of knowledge in our Native program. Next, as you know, the YSD has a very powerful partnership with the Yakama Nation, and it is critical to the success of our Native students. As part of our service delivery model, we engage in a yearly formal consultation with the Yakama Nation, and we also try to meet quarterly with tribal elders as well as neighboring school districts. The Yakama School District has taken additional steps to honor this relationship with the Yakama Nation with the installation of the flagpoles at Central Services and at Zephyl Stadium, which fly the flag of the 14 Confederate tribes and bands of the Yakama Nation. We have also developed and implemented our land acknowledgement. We are planning the upcoming Native Education graduation ceremony and have designated June 10th on the instructional calendar as Treaty Day to commemorate the signing of the Treaty of 1855. As we look to the 2022-2023 school year, the Native Ed Department will be working on expanding services through the implementation of the Tribal Language Grant with our multilingual department. We are looking to leverage grant funding to support staff to integrate tribal perspectives into existing curriculum. And we will be focusing on ensuring the since time immemorial curriculum is being implemented at the grade levels with fidelity. And that concludes the presentation on Native Ed. And I'm sure Dr. Darling is happy to answer any questions that you may have. Just kidding, just kidding.
Any questions for Dr. Ellis or Dr. Darling? I have a couple of questions. If you can share with me a little bit more the Johnson O'Malley a partnership. I'm not familiar with that, so if you could just expand a little bit more on that and provide some additional details.
Sure. So Johnson O'Malley is the name of the agency, and it is, here's how I best can describe it. So students who have been identified as tribal enrolled generate funds. Long time ago, those funds used to come to the district and we would distribute them to our students and provide supplies, so on and so forth. A few years back, the decision was made to streamline that process. And so the tribal agency, Johnson O'Malley, now receives those funds for us. And then so we then in turn refer students to that agency if they need specific supplies. And then they are the financial agent for that money.
And you'd mentioned the since time immemorial curriculum. Is there? I'd be interested in taking a look at that. It's not a curriculum that I'm familiar with. Is there a website or something that I can go to just to take a look at that?
Absolutely. I'll send out the link. But if you on OSPI, if you type in Native Education, towards the bottom there is the link. It is a social studies curriculum, and as a teaching, and thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. as a teaching and learning department, that is one of on our list to ensure that it's being implemented with fidelity.
Okay. And then I think I saw on one of the slides, we're evaluating a language program. Is that right?
Yes, yes. We were awarded a Heritage Language Grant. And this first year is we're working with the Yakama Nation. This is a planning year, just trying to figure out all of the nuances. It's a $60,000 grant to have the native language as part of options for our kiddos.
Awesome, thank you. That's great to see that we have all of these supports in place. I think most of my own learning about Native American peoples came after high school, and so it's great that and I had to seek out that education, and so it's great that we're able to provide that in the public school system. Thank you so much. No other questions for me. Any other questions from board members?
Yes, I'm wondering if you could provide an example or two on how staff are integrating tribal perspectives in the existing curriculum. So I'd be interested in learning more about that.
Yes, so that's a growth area for us. So I wouldn't want to give you false information, and I don't necessarily have specific examples. But it is an area that we are focusing on moving forward. And Superintendent Green?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so glad you asked that question, especially when we're talking about the time immemorial curriculum. I will tell you that the work that we've done with the Yakama Nation has been significant. And that is a focus that they're very interested in as well. They recognize, when I say they, I'm talking about the tribal chief and his liaison who attends quarterly here in the Yakima School District to discuss issues that affect Yakama Nation residents and students, of course. And that is one of the topics for our next session. I can tell you that the fidelity with which time immemorial is being implemented across the state is not meeting the spirit of how it was intended to be rolled forward. And that is something that is definitely on my radar. There's information that I cannot share with you about that at this time, but I can tell you within probably the next 3 months, I will be able to share with you a plan moving forward to make sure that we are addressing that across our system. So when Dr. Ellis talks about that being as a growth area, she is absolutely correct, and we are not out of line with that, but it does not mean that we do not strive to be the exemplar in the state. But to this point, that's something that we're working towards, and we look at having tremendous growth in that area this coming year.
And then one more question. I know several years ago during the graduation ceremony or event that, you know, a lot of Native American students receive gifts from elders, symbols from families that are passed on from generation to generation and so forth. Are those somehow integrated into those ceremonies or allowed? I know a few years ago there was some challenges with that, so I was just wondering where we're at with that policy.
So I can
do you want to articulate? I don't want to speak out of turn, so that's why I'm waiting.
I was not trying to stall for you to answer. I was trying to find the button there. So I think that the way that I would address that, not knowing what happened historically, Director Navarro, I think you and I have a wonderful conversation coming up, because there's obviously something that happened that I'm not aware of in the past, pre-existing my tenure here as superintendent. So I look forward to finding out exactly what that was. So as I try to answer this, I hope I'm answering this the right way, but I'm going to share with you the truth about what we're doing moving forward. And that is that Dr. Ellis mentioned the graduation. It's more of an acknowledgement celebration for students of Native American descent who are graduating. You typically see this in districts that have actually a more robust connection through their Native American program, which we are developing. And so the idea is to bring the Native American families and their elders together in a session to acknowledge the achievements that they have attained during the course of their school career, culminating with acknowledgement of their graduating. So it is not a graduation ceremony, it is an acknowledgement of them, the journey throughout the educational system and reaching graduation. At those sessions, I would anticipate, you've already mentioned that we will be sharing a piece of artwork for all of those graduates, but that would be a time where you see, in some cases, gifts being shared and acknowledgement that is a separate part and not part of the greater graduation ceremony. So that is the idea of what would happen during that time, and I'm excited about the prospects of that moving forward, and not having that mix in with graduation and causing some of the maybe issues that to which you're referring. I hope that answers your question, or is there a secondary question that I could clarify?
No, thank you. That's good.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Ellis. Put together a wonderful presentation. We always enjoy hearing more detail about the specific kinds of programs. So thank you so much for your enthusiasm and passion, and for sharing your report with us today.
Thank you for allowing me the time and space.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is items of interest. Are there any reports from members of the board? Okay. Next is the superintendent's update. Superintendent Green.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you, Director Villanueva. Today, I'll share with you, obviously, our new character word of the month, which I believe is grace, and yes, it is grace. I know that because I was able to drive by one of our reader boards early in the month, and I thought, oh, it's the wrong one, but yes, we are now in a different month. So grace is the quality or state of being considerate or thoughtful, disposition or the act or instance of kindness, courtesy, or clemency. In Spanish, cortés, la calidad de ser considerado o reflexivo, disposición a realizar un acto de bondad, cortesía o clemencia. The trait that we acknowledge as far as the relate to the character word of grace is effective communicator, and in Español, característica comunicador efectivo. The remainder of the superintendent report, or my personal involvement, will continue after our update, our COVID update, which hopefully we have good news here on the horizon, but we have our Assistant Superintendent of Operations, Stacy Locke, followed by Jewel Brumley. It's great to see Jewel in the crowd here again. And then any mask mandate update from OSPI will hopefully be included in that session. Stacy.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Green. Good afternoon, Vice President Villanueva, and the rest of our Board of Directors. It's flashing, so it must be good news. So as you can see in the far right-hand column, our percentages are just diminishing before our eyes, which is absolutely wonderful news. And if we head to the next slide at the bottom, you can see that we are even down from last week. We had 1.9% of our students quarantined last week, and we're down to simply 0.8%. You can also see that we had 12 positive students last week, or the last couple of weeks, versus 76. I mean, the numbers are just, like I said, looking fantastic. Next slides, please, Barb. And then on our testing site updates, I know when we talked with Ryan over at the health department, Ryan and Melissa last week, they're ceasing the Sundome testing site because of the reduction in the number of positive cases. And as you can see, we've dropped from 16 to 5. So over the last couple of weeks, we've dropped about 11% in positive cases related to COVID-19. And as a result of that, couple things, we have kind of moved into our new location over next to Dutch Brothers. It's not officially open, but it's open for testing so that we could get our community and our families out of the weather, and it's large enough to provide that appropriate testing as a new venue. We've also reduced the hours. Our new hours are Monday through Friday from 1 to 4 every day that school is in session. We do wait for guidance from the Department of Health and OSPI later this week. They're talking about that guidance coming out around the 11th or the 12th, and that will give us a little more detail about what life looks like in the school system from here on out. The mask mandate does drop at 11:59 on Friday, March 11th. That would be 11:59 p.m. So as of 1:00 a.m. on Saturday, there will be no more masking. And that will include, I know Norm asked last week, so just to clarify, students will no longer be required to wear masks on our school buses either. So moving forward, that's what it looks like. Can I answer any questions for anybody? Okay, I will turn it over to my partner, Jewel Brumley. Jewel.
Hi, thank you, Stacy. Good afternoon, everyone. I also have some great numbers to present here. Our COVID daily cases, I reset to just February to March because the January numbers were so large, I couldn't even see the numbers that we had on other days. So most of the time our numbers are in double digits. The last 2 days, we've had single digit positive cases in Yakima County, just in the single digits. Our 14-day rate is down to 341 as of today. Our 7-day rate is down to 140 as of today. Sorry about the typo at the bottom there. I just got the data, just finished updating the numbers right before Superintendent Green was talking about his update. So our cases by vaccination status in March, we have had one person who is vaccinated who caught COVID and 54 who are unvaccinated. So it's a stark difference like every other month. Zip code rates, these typically get updated every 2 weeks on Tuesdays, but they're all declining, so that's good. Hospitalizations, again, nice stair step down. We have 16 hospitalized as of today. Vaccination status, they don't have this updated for March yet, so I'll get that updated hopefully by next week. This again is not updated the deaths for in the county. We've had 3 in March so far, according to the daily rates, but it's not on this slide. Percent of hospitalization by age, we've had only 3 so far, or 5 so far in March. So it's very low, which is really good. We do have 3 intubated today, but still very low. School age cases as of the beginning of last week have gone down quite a bit. And our rate at the time of last week, and again, they update these on Tuesdays, was 443, but we're at 340 now, so that's a lot better. Vaccination status, again, went up by 2% over last week, or 0.2% over last week, initiating. And the 5-year-old to and up, that has gone up 0.3% since last week. Fully vaccinated went up 0.2%. And initiating the fully vaccinated, or being fully vaccinated 5 and up, has gone up 0.2%, not 3. The forecast, you can barely see the numbers. So I added another slide that just goes from February into the March predictions. So it's a lot easier to see because again, the numbers were so high in January that you can't read the scale beyond that. But I was a little over our estimate for this week. So I will adjust for the rest of March, but I still have us going down, a little bit of a slowdown on the cases going down next week because of excuse me, the mask mandate coming off. We might get a couple more cases, but I still think we will go down. It just may slow or dive down because we've really dived down. So anyone have any questions?
Any questions for the board for Jewel or Stacy? No questions, but just a comment. It's really a relief after 2 years to finally see these numbers going down. It feels almost like COVID is gone. It's hard to believe two years ago this week, we're beginning to hear about this thing called COVID. So it's been such a long, exhausting journey. So it's really just awesome to see these numbers dive the way they have been.
Yeah, I started collecting data when Yakima County hit 100 cases for the county.
Oh, wow. Thank you for all of your data collection over these last two years, Jewel, and for all of your work, Stacy, to get us through these very difficult last 2 years. And hopefully things will wrap up fairly quickly and we can go back to quote unquote normal, whatever that'll look like for us. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay.
All right, I will continue then. Thank you. And Director Villanueva, when you mentioned 2 years this coming week, that sent kind of a shock through me. I was not thinking about that upcoming date, but as soon as you said that, I looked at my calendar and I'm like, I'll never forget the day that we closed for what we thought, or went to remote for what we thought was going to be a very short time. And here we are now. It feels like, it just feels different this week. So thank you so much for calling that out as well. I do have a couple more items. One is that the Yakima Online graduation location, we are moving actually that location from the Capitol Theater to the Eisenhower Auditorium at the request of Principal Lois Menard. And we are concerned about the standards that the Capitol Theater currently is holding to and has said that they will continue to hold to regarding entry into the theater. And we know that we have many parents that would be unable to attend, showing certain ID information to enter. So for that reason, we are moving it to the Eisenhower Auditorium. Now, even if those restrictions come off the Capitol Theater, we needed to make that decision now because there are preparations that need to take place, announcements that would go forward, and people need to make plans. So I want to call that to the attention of the board that on that day where we typically have the Yakima Online graduation earlier at the Capitol Theater, followed by the Stanton graduation ceremony, we will start at Eisenhower and then move to the Capitol Theater. So it'll be a little bit of a rush, but we will be able to make that. We'll make sure that that is something that doesn't go long there on the first session. Do you have any questions about the change of location or as to why?
I guess question is, are those same concerns in place for, would they also impact Stanton graduation?
Not to the degree that we would see at Yakima Online, and in consultation with both of the principals, it was we're following the recommendation from each of them, and one was confident that it would not impact, and the other was very reserved and wanted to change the location for her families. So I can't say with 100% certainty that it wouldn't, but I can tell you that putting that in the hands of our principals for their assessment and their recommendation, it was to keep Stanton at its current location at the Capitol Theater. I do personally believe that those restrictions will be removed by that date, but I certainly can understand the need to plan ahead and make sure that those announcements go out and that we don't gamble on what is somebody's graduation for Yakima Online.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
All right, and then the last item that I'll share with you, a couple things actually. First is I know that you've opened your board documents. If you wouldn't mind refreshing it if you haven't, there might be a slight change in one of the documents. So don't exit. I think that's a good example of what you don't want to do. I know that we just lost, here she comes back. But that's one way to refresh, but just hit the refresh button on your board docs. So thank you for the non-example, Director Villanueva, appreciate that. And you've now changed locations of everybody on my screen, so I have to recalibrate here. And then the other thing I just wanted to share is the equity audit has been shared for finalization. Last week, we did review that with the organization that conducted the equity report, and they are conducting their final run through of the document. And I did think it was going to be here last week, but it will be here actually this week, and then I will share it out to the board. And we do have a presentation of the equity report scheduled, or equity audit scheduled for a board meeting. So that will be actually a formal presentation to the board. And with that, you should see that the next person up is the Yakima City update, and I can introduce that unless you have any questions about the superintendent update.
Superintendent Green, I think I missed why you asked us to refresh the page.
Yeah, thank you. Because we had a shift in one of the documents. We just had to refresh one of the documents and make sure that you had the latest information. So,
okay. Which document was that?
It actually moved the Yakima City update in front of the budget development parameters.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. We know that. So that's the reason why I'll explain that during the intro.
Okay. Please go ahead.
All right. Should I go ahead and move forward with the Yakima City update?
Yes, please.
All right, wonderful. So this is a tremendous opportunity. Bob Harrison, is so good to see you with us here today. Bob Harrison is our Yakima City manager. He is waving to everyone. Got the parade wave. Thank you very much, Bob. And one of the things that we try to do with Fidelity is engage in consultation with other organizations. You know that we had one planned with Union Gap last week, the Union Gap School Board. That is pushed out now for another date. And prior to me coming to, well, actually my first year on the board, we continued with consultation. Oh, no, we did not. We did not have any consultation with the city council. So it paused the year, I think, that I came on board. And then we have been in a state of flux. And with Bob coming on board new as the city manager and me relatively new now in my first 3 years, we wanted to make sure that we started to re-engage both the city council and the Yakima School Board in some like information. Those of you that have been with the board for a while, not everyone on this, I know that Norm, I don't think this has happened during your tenure, and Director Beckett, not during your tenure, but we do engage in a mutual joint meeting with city council once a year. So we're looking at the possibility of starting that up again. And we felt that the best way to lay the groundwork for that was to have me present to the city council, which I did last week. I was able to speak with the city council and share some great things that are happening in the Yakima School District, along with Sarah Cordova, who did a phenomenal job sharing the state of our athletics and where we're headed. And in turn, Bob is here this evening to share a short report from the city, and we'll be looking at doing this quarterly. So it's not a monthly thing. We'll just be doing this quarterly, and we look forward to re-engaging with city council and our school board in consultation around a mutual meeting. So with that, welcome, a little belated welcome to the city of Yakima, Bob. Thank you for joining us this evening, and my understanding is that you are going to share some information with us today on safe routes to schools.
Right. Thank you, Superintendent Green. And it's wonderful to meet you, the school board directors today. Some of you I'm seeing for the first time, and some of you were one of the first people I met when I came into town. So I appreciate this opportunity here to speak with you today. And as the superintendent mentioned, in addition to having a joint meeting, hopefully later this year, I do appreciate this opportunity to keep you up to date on some of the issues that are going on with the city and provide a venue for you to ask some questions if there are any of me that you may have. So as we talked about traffic, and you may have seen the police chief's letter that he issued to the community about 2 weeks ago. But our number one aspect of crime in the city is domestic violence. And we sincerely appreciate all the efforts that school district has been engaged and involved with on domestic violence in cooperation with the city and our coalition. The second most significant impact in terms of injuries or fatalities is traffic. And so safe routes to school is critically important to us as we look at making sure our children have a safe route to get to their school district if they choose to walk or frankly to drive. And so we have had several projects we've been able to complete in the past. We were able to do West Valley Middle School in 2016 and Adams Elementary and Washington Middle School back in 2018. And we completed Garfield Elementary School back in 2019. And we've also been looking at, as part of our educational efforts, the installation of rapid flashing beacons that at least help provide some notice and update that there's a crosswalk upcoming. And there's a couple of projects that we are planning to do here in 2022. The first is McClure Elementary, which will be starting here later this summer, as well as Robertson Elementary. And we've got some additional projects that we have identified in coordination with the school administration. The first being Hoover Elementary and Nob Hill Elementary as well that we'll be looking at as potential options for this upcoming year. We have a couple other projects as well that we're looking at. We won't know the final projects that we'll be submitting for grants, and a lot of this money that we have received is grants. Some of it does involve some of the taxpayers' investment in the matching requirements that we have. And so with that, appreciate the opportunity to just be here. We appreciated the opportunity to have several representatives from the school and the WIA that showed up at our council meeting last week. We've had some great events. We saw a lot of students and participants showing up at our restaurants last week. We know that event has had a big economic impact in our community. So thank you again, and thanks for the opportunity to come in and address you and say hello.
You look great.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Any questions or comments from board members?
Hi, this is Norm. I just have a couple of questions. I know that it's a real challenge in Yakima, the way some streets have been widened and remodeled and so on, but there are some streets that have some really bad sidewalk patterns. And an example in my neighborhood, both Lincoln and Summit View have areas where there are no sidewalks at all, or then you'll have a sidewalk for a block or two and then no sidewalk at all. And so that makes walking to and from school really risky for kids in those arterials. And I'm just wondering if there are any plans to look at areas in the city where we could increase the number of sidewalks.
So I think you hit on a key issue that we've had. One of the big challenges that the city runs into is when we annex areas from the county. They're not built, the public infrastructure isn't built to the same standards as the city has, and the sidewalks are a great example. And so what you end up with is exactly what you mentioned, which is kind of a piecemeal approach to sidewalk connections. We're always looking for opportunities if we have funds available or receive grant funds to make those connections. It's important, but as we all know, we do have limited funds at the city, and so we try to get done what we can afford to get done.
Okay, and I want to thank you. I have one other question too. I was watching a news report the other evening, and there was a city council person who I will not name, but made a statement about students in Yakima not having access to internet. And my understanding is that the district has made a concerted effort to provide every student in this district with a computer and with adequate broadband access to run those computers. So I'm wondering if there's a gap in information either on our end or if your council person misspoke. And if so, we have Andy Gonzalez, I see on here, and maybe Andy or Trevor can speak to the degree of access that students in Yakima have.
I would be happy to answer that. The part of the reason that we're engaging this new opportunity with Bob here coming on board and me presenting also to City Council is to help eliminate some of those misinformation moments. So, I think we're taking the right steps to getting everybody on the same page. And when we do present on our technology and let the City Council know exactly what it looks like, then I'm sure that we won't have that error take place again. So I don't think anything was meant intentionally. I think it's in absence of clear information. Sometimes we have speculation that then takes over. So I just want to thank again, Bob, for the opportunity to help clarify some of the misconceptions that are out there.
Thank you, Superintendent Green. And I think that's important. At this point, the council has just set a study session. And so we will certainly take that opportunity. I know the schools have taken a lead on that to present at that study session. There's been a community-wide effort to look at expanding broadband and broadband access in the region. A lot of that's been done privately or with some of our nonprofits. So I think we'll be able to provide quite a bit of information on that and see what, if any, city role there is for that into the future.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Harrison?
No, I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to come and address you and be introduced, and look forward to getting the quarterly updates, whatever we can do as public entities to continue to build credibility and support within the community. And I think our community does want our two organizations to continue to work together in the best interests of the taxpayers and the students. And again, I just appreciate this opportunity to come in and speak with you, and appreciate the superintendent and your staff coming in and talking to our council. So I'll see you probably in about 3 months.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for being here. Student safety is of course one of our core tenants on the board, and is reflected in our one of our board policies and statements somewhere. And so thank you for your presentation, and Superintendent Green, thank you to you as well for creating these opportunities to partner with our local city council and city staff. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the 2022-23 budget development parameters with Becky Neeson. You want to kick things off, Superintendent Green?
Absolutely. Thank you. I believe you have a PowerPoint presentation. If you would go ahead and open that. And I think that we'll have Barb take us through this. But Becky, so again, I can't say enough good things. It almost seems redundant. We hear so much from Becky, but to have her and the transparencies that she's created, and now to share our budget development parameters for this coming year is something that we're in the throngs of. This is a very complex process, but certainly necessary in developing the budget, which will be presented to the board June, July, ratified late July, early August. So with that, Becky, our first go around, would you please share?
Thank you, Superintendent Green, and good afternoon, board. This is the budget development parameters for the 2022-2023 budget year. So the board sets an expectation for sound financial practices, appropriate checks and balances, prudent investments, and effective planning for and management of district resources. There's a statement in the policy governance 1000.2.4 related to financial planning for any fiscal year or the remaining part of any fiscal year, not deviating materially from Board of Directors' ends, goals, priorities, risking fiscal jeopardy, or failing to be derived from multi-year consideration. So the next slide, I'm going to walk you through the parameters that we have, and they're listed in random order. They serve as a guide for our discussion, analysis, and development of the district's general fund budget. So one is the district is committed to and accountable for providing quality educational programs and learning opportunities for all students. 2, resources, people, time, and funding will be aligned in accordance with the district's strategic plan, federal and state education reform standards, instructional strategies, and assessments consistent with effective schools research. 3, all budget decisions will be made through an equity lens with consideration of a racial impact analysis. 4, the district will provide a safe and healthy learning environment for students and staff. 5, decisions that change program or direction will only be made after considering their impact on student learning. 6, the district will comply with all federal and state laws, regulations, applicable legislation, contracts, and labor agreements. In the next slide, Barb. Thank you. 7, teaching and learning services, as well as other central services support, are necessary to support instructional programs. Analysis discussion of the impact must accompany budget reductions in these areas. 8, optional programs and activities for both staff and students that are not self-supporting should be considered for reduction first, safeguarding basic programs that are required by the state or district and considering the effectiveness of programs. Number 9, if the total number of employees is reduced, reduction in force will be recommended only after reasonable placement alternatives have been exhausted. 10, in general, one-time resources will not be obligated to support ongoing expenditures. Projects and activities without ongoing funding should have a formal sunset date. The district will not fail to maintain an unreserved fund balance of 5% or greater of the total general fund budget without board approval. So I could answer any questions for you regarding our development parameters.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I just
Yes.
have one. I didn't look it up in the budget. I suppose I could go look it up. But what is our current unreserved fund balance? And are we above the 5% minimum?
Yes, so it's the 12.7 million, roughly, just over that.
Becky, that 12.7 million is the 5%, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's just to get us to 5%. We are certainly over that.
Yes.
I do have a question. Do you anticipate, without going into details, because I know we have the equity report coming up, but in regards to number 3, do you anticipate the budget being impacted by that audit?
The easy answer is yes. I cannot tell you in which direction. I think in some ways we can see some savings in certain areas by addressing some of the considerations that will come forward, but in others, I think there will be ample investment. So I do believe by the end we will see an increase, but the key for us is making sure that any of those increases fall in line with that number 10, which is that one-time resources are not obligated to support ongoing expenditures. So when we're talking about the ESSER funding that has come forward, we just have to be very mindful stewards of what we're able to continue beyond the sunset date of, I believe, September of 2024, and how we can sustain that. So the short answer is yes. I believe we will be expending a bit more, but I think it will vary from area to area.
I also wanted to add an acknowledgement to Director Villanueva. That was a recommendation from her last year during the budget development parameters that we add this equity statement. And so number 3 was developed by myself and Dr. Marcus Pimpleton after last year's presentation. So thank you for acknowledging that one, Raymond.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Just have one question, and thank you for including that statement in there. I'd forgotten I'd recommended that, so I was very impressed that was in here. That was all back. So on item number 4, the district will provide a safe and healthy learning environment for students and staff. Does that, we've heard so much from students and staff, particularly during our school presentations around the mental and social health needs of our students. Would those considerations be captured in item 4, or is that maybe an opportunity for us to be more direct, I guess, in maybe some potential interest in focusing supports on social, emotional, and mental health care?
I think you bring up a great bit of conversation that will continue to take place at the cabinet and the superintendent level. For me, I do see what you're calling out will be addressed in that number 4. So barring a change in the conversation with superintendents and cabinet, I would say that we would place all of that information and how we would address that under criteria 4. And isn't it great when you suggest something and you're like, who was the smart person that suggested? And we add that only to find out that it was you. So.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, thank you very much, Becky. The next item on our agenda is discussion for in-person versus virtual board meetings. We just heard from Stacy Locke and Jewel Brumley the questions, or I'm sorry, the updated data and dashboards with COVID information. And we had set the first meeting of each month to talk about virtual meeting status and which direction we wanted to go in. So I will open up the virtual floor for thoughts, comments, and proposals.
Well, given the recent COVID report, things are looking really, really positive. And unless there's a spike again, when the masks come off, I'm pretty comfortable with getting back to in-person meetings as soon as possible and doing it central services. As long we haven't seen from the state yet, and that's going to come out. They haven't talked about room capacities and some of those limitations, and that's supposed to be part of the new report that comes out later this week, I believe. So, but I'm ready to go back to in person if everyone else is.
Okay.
A quick question, and I know we broached the subject at one point, but is the facility at Central Services also capable of live streaming and recording, as we have grown accustomed to since the beginning of the pandemic?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, then I guess I would make a motion that we resume in-person board meetings, effective immediately.
So I don't think this requires a motion. I think it's maybe just general consensus from the board. I don't see this as an action item. So so interest from Norm, from Director Walker and Beckett to go back to in-person meetings. Director Navarro, thoughts, comments?
Yes, I would agree with that and returning to in-person. board meetings.
Okay. I'm also in favor of returning to in-person board meetings. Generally speaking, I'd like to suggest that we consider in-person business meetings and in-person school visit meetings, and for efficiency's sake and using technology for its full capability, and for those who travel, in person can be a challenge. And so wonder if the board would consider continuing some form of virtual meetings when it's possible, but certainly focusing on in-person for our business meeting and for the school visit meetings.
Well, it seems that we can always, when we do in-person meetings at Central Services, we always have the option of it's presented live streamed anyway. So anyone that needs to do virtual or prefer to do virtual can just tune into the meeting. So I'm real comfortable with just going back to in-person meetings and broadcasting them like we always have. So.
Well, my proposal is more continuing with some board meetings in this completely virtual format. It's, for me, it's more of an efficiency thing. If I have back-to-back meetings or something, just the 15 drive time, for example, to get to Central Services.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that makes sense especially for you and Raymond. Yeah. And Ryan too, depending on his business schedule. But anyway, I'm comfortable doing as much in person as we possibly can. I just think I like virtual. I don't have to leave the house, and I can take care of the dog and all that, but it is nice to meet in person.
It is. And my proposal, I guess, is more around efficiency and eliminating drive time. And, I can go from one meeting to another without having to plan in additional drive time. So it's purely from an efficiency perspective. So initially what I was proposing is that we move to in-person for our school visits, business meetings, any other board retreats, any other kind of special meetings, and continue with, I guess that would leave 2 meetings a month, 2 Monday meetings a month in a virtual format.
Okay, I can live with that, but I'm.
Graciela, is your proposal more of a gradual return to a regular schedule, or is this a new, like a hybrid model that you're presenting?
Yeah, I'm suggesting more of a hybrid model on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
We had talked before COVID hit. We had talked about allowing some kind of virtual attendance by board members. At that time, I was traveling quite a bit, and it was an option that the board was willing to accommodate. And so whether it's kind of a permanent hybrid schedule where, again, maybe 2 Mondays a month are virtual, and then a business meeting and the school visit Monday meeting is in person, and again, retreats and stuff, or some kind of, depending on the technology, I don't know how challenging it would be to just have an ongoing virtual capability. If there could be a combo at the same time, in person and virtual attendance by board members at any one meeting, if that makes sense. So for example, in my work meetings, there's a number of people who are permanently remote working, and others who are generally in the office, but all of the meetings are set up so you could be in person or virtual and attend, at full capacity in either scenario.
How would it work if we just scheduled everything in person, but we created the option that if you had a need to attend virtually, that could be done without any special question? Is that a workable compromise? The only I don't have a problem with your proposal, Graciela, but the only problem I see that might happen is kind of getting in patterns of, I don't know if the school presentation meetings are always on a particular Monday of the month, like the first, second, or fourth, or whatever. We know that the business meeting is typically the second Tuesday of the month. So that's pretty consistent. But the only thing I would maybe think would be a challenge in that was if it's not consistent, which Mondays are in and which Mondays are out. And so we're always, it's not a consistent ongoing pattern. That way people can find us if they want to find us. If it's bouncing around periodically, then it makes it hard for people to find us.
I think generally the last Monday of each month is the school visit.
Okay.
How would it had been.
Okay.
The frequency. Jenny Rodriguez, we do teaching and learning department reports the first Monday of each month, business meetings the third Tuesday, and school visits the fourth Monday of each month. Lots of comments from Raymond or Ryan regarding a hybrid schedule.
I'm still processing. There's both positives and negatives on that one, so I just need a few minutes to process.
Well, being the retiree in this group, I'm completely flexible, so I'm happy to go with whatever you folks that are still out in the day-to-day professional world, what works best for you, I'm happy to live with.
I think there's a reality to, the acceptance and awareness of increased technology, to where if we have a situation where, similar to if someone needs to have an excused absence, there should be an ability for somebody to come in remotely if they're out of town or if they're unavailable for some reason. But I personally believe that this is a scenario with good governance where we need to be meeting in person. We need to be connected. We need to see each other and hear each other and understand each other on a more personal level to make better decisions as a board for the district. And so I think we should be meeting in person as much as possible. But I do think that the technology is there that makes it easy for us in cases where it's really necessary to be able to all be together instead of being a group of less than 5. So I'm certainly open to the idea. I just think we need to flesh it out and have a written policy.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn because for the last 2 years, right, we've grown accustomed to, I guess just rolling out of bed and sitting in our desk, right, and we're in a board meeting. So that is very convenient, very easy to do. So I would miss that part of it. But I think that as elected officials, we do need to be in the public, accessible to the public. And so I'm not sure still. So maybe this gradual, maybe in a month, maybe we just do the business meetings now, and then in a month from now we go to, we go from 0 to 100% in a month or 2 months. I don't know. It's kind of what I'm thinking, but a gradual process, because change does take time, right? And we're gonna have to change some of our habits in terms of, getting ready, getting all our whatever together, and travel and so forth and so on. So I can understand change in our schedules, our habits, and just the way we've done business for the last 2 years. So I would be agreeable to a gradual process, but not as a hybrid model. So ongoing. So I don't know if we have general consensus now.
Well, looking at our immediate calendar, we have March 15th, of course, is an in-person meeting anyway. So I currently show as having it at Eisenhower, but on my calendar, that could be incorrect. I'm not sure. But does that mean that we will have it at the Central Services next week? Or do we have consensus on that?
Is next week the business meeting?
It is the business meeting, yeah.
Okay. I think that would be, because I am really in favor of having the business meetings in person. So I think we could immediately transition. And that's a lot easier. It's after hours. You don't have to worry, at least for those of us working, or for me, I don't have to worry about meetings being scheduled or things like that. So that's the business meetings are very easy to transition, at least for me, in person. So next Tuesday then, Superintendent Green, are we prepared for in-person next Tuesday business meeting? Superintendent Green?
If we should go?
Next Tuesday, I think currently Director Walker had mentioned that the Tuesday, March 15 business meeting is noted as being held at Eisenhower. So I'm just confirming that we are ready to go back to in-person for the business meeting on March 15.
Barb, you're saying no?
It can't be at Eisenhower because they have play there. So we wanted to
we could do it here at Central Services.
Central Services, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Monday, the March 21st is retreat. So that should be at Central Services anyway, even though it's Monday.
We've already decided from last meeting that we're going to postpone that retreat. I removed it from your calendar.
Oh, okay.
And so we will just have a 3:30 meeting that day.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So then I guess we can decide if that's going to be a remote virtual meeting or if that's going to be in person. We just have, since it's a regular 3:30 meeting.
Stacy has her hand raised. Go ahead, Stacy.
Thank you, Director Villanueva. Just to note, we don't know what's coming from the Department of Health or OSPI, perhaps regarding distancing, etc. And I don't know whether the conference room set up for a boardroom meeting open to the public is big enough at this point, but I have no idea what's coming in that recommendation that may change.
And with the mask mandate changing, does that include? I mean, previously there were specific rules around board meetings and how they needed to be held. Are those meeting restrictions lifted with the mask mandate? And
I have no idea what is going to come forward. The only thing I know is the mask mandate is lifted, and we're waiting for the Department of Health to give us some guidance as to whether physical distancing is no longer in place or is it still in place, and in open public meetings, what does that mean? So we don't have that information yet. So just to let people know.
And do we anticipate receiving that information on March 11th, or do we know when we might get that guidance?
Later this week was what they said. And typically they give it to a Friday night. So
open public meetings have been allowed around the state for months now, and with the decline in case rates, it seems unlikely that that would go the other direction. If we had a spike or another variant come alive, I would certainly see that being a possibility. But if you look around the state, boards of directors are meeting all around the state. Schools in session, teachers and students are meeting in person. We're talking about a relatively small group of people here, and I just don't imagine that the guidance will change in the next couple of days. But of course, as we go forward with any situation like this, if a variant emerges or whatever and guidance changes, I would expect that we would reevaluate everything as we go down the road.
And so the guidance that's in place now around the social distancing, does that I'm not up on specifically what the guidance says today around public meetings. You know, at one point it had said something to the effect of you must wear a mask, and if you don't, and the person refuses to wear a mask, you have to stop the meeting and then restart the meeting in a virtual or in another location. Will those specific rules, is that specific to masking only, or is it also have to do with social distancing if people do not social distance? Do we know?
I believe those changes and guidelines are what's coming out probably Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if that guidance comes out Friday and it says everything's lifted, is that, or does the board feel comfortable moving forward with having an in-person business meeting on Tuesday the 15th?
Yes, I am.
And planning wise for the district, does that give you enough time to plan, or are there any other issues that we need to be aware of?
I would recommend planning for an in-person meeting, and then if there's a change, we can make a switch. It would be much easier to plan for the in-person and make a switch to anything different than it would to try to do the opposite.
Okay. Okay. So it looks like we have general consensus to go to in-person on at least Tuesday, the 15th for that business meeting. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then for all of our other Monday meetings, do we want to, I guess, let me ask a question, and this maybe is more of a technology capacity or capability question. So it sounded like there was general interest in, or general support in allowing some kind of hybrid. So standard meeting format would be in person, but then allowing for virtual attendance as needed. Is that, I guess, how easy is that to set up? You know, did we do anything special to do in person plus virtual, or would we just continue sending a Zoom link out? I guess that also makes it easier for staff to attend, and board members could elect to do in person or virtual at any time, or is that something what we need to arrange ahead of time?
So I would certainly want to engage with Director Gonzalez around what those logistics might look like. I hesitate to put him on the spot right now about all the intricacies involved, but I can certainly, for that meeting next week, have a response on how easy that could be or how challenging.
So it looks like generally was interested in moving back to in-person. Raymond shared the option of transitioning back to full in-person. And maybe that was a month of virtual meetings, except for the business meeting, before we go back to full in-person meetings. Did I capture your suggestion correctly, Raymond?
Well, the site visit.
And the site visit?
As you had proposed.
For March only?
Well, I'm not sure. I just threw out a month or 2 months, so I'm not sure. But the sooner the better, I think, would be my preference.
Okay. So for the month of March, thoughts from Ryan and Norm on transitioning back to in-person. So business meeting in person, and our final meeting of the month, which is the school visit meeting in person, and the other meetings virtual, which I guess that just means there's maybe one other meeting that would be virtual. Is that right? I like that suggestion. I would be in favor of that, at least for the month of March.
I guess the question I have is, if we're going to have a hybrid as well, how effective, or would we have any challenges with the board chair or acting chair leading the meeting virtually and everybody else being in person. I'm just wondering, I've been to meetings where that has been a challenge. So I don't know if that's how we would handle that. And I'm not sure with Martha, her timeline, if she's planning to return or was she lead meetings virtually and so forth. So
I've seen meetings led successfully by somebody virtual when there's individuals that are in person. If you know, I see it working pretty smoothly. I don't know that I had an issue with that.
and if our technology that supports that, you
Sure.
know, microphones, whatever, cameras and so forth. So that would be one of my concerns with at least the board chair or the acting chair, vice president,
Mhm.
leading the meetings from remote.
Okay. So Superintendent Green, maybe that and Barb and maybe with Andy as well, in planning for what hybrid could look like, that could be one of the things that we talk about and figure out how to do in an effective way.
Certainly. Right now, Barb, would you share what you have down as far as what we've ascertained from the conversation today? Barb, could you share the dates? And if we're virtual?
Yes. March 15th is the business meeting, so it'll be in person here at Central Services in conference room A and B. Andy has agreed that it's okay to do a live stream from the professional library with overage. If we have more people, they can sit in the professional library and see the meeting. On the 21st, we have agreed, it sounds like, to do it virtually. And then on the 28th, I'm uncertain, I didn't capture it correctly, if we were going to be at the school site visit, which happens to be YB Tech that day, or if we're going to be here in person at Central Services.
I think
I would suggest
at the site if possible.
I would suggest at the YB Tech site in person.
Okay.
And then I guess let's plan for that first meeting in April, since this is the first meeting in March. I guess I'll suggest that we do that virtually. And then we can have this discussion again on whether we want to continue transitioning into April or go back to full in person in April.
You mentioned the first date in April. What about, do we have March 28th figured out, Barb? Yeah.
Yes, so we'll be at YB Tech on March 28th, and then on April 11th, it'll be virtual.
Oh, because of
spring break.
Not New Year's, spring break.
Yeah.
Is everyone comfortable with the schedule that's in the chat that Barb shared? I'm not seeing any no's, so I think we'll give a couple extra seconds for folks to speak up. Otherwise, we'll move forward with this schedule. And Barb, you'll make sure that our meeting invites are updated with the appropriate location.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, and then on the April 11 meeting, if we could add Barb to the items of board interest, follow-up discussion on continuing the transition to in-person.
Sounds good. Will do.
All right, thank you, everybody. Moving on in our agenda, we have policy governance monitoring reports, and we have Becky Nason with the financial, wait, am I? Yeah, this is a different agenda item, with the financial planning and budgeting monitoring report. You're going to kick it off, Dr. Regan?
Absolutely. This will be an easy pass, and we'll go directly to Becky Neeson. Becky, would you please address the Executive Limitations Monitoring Report on fiscal planning and budgeting?
Thank you, Superintendent Green and members of the board. Director Villanueva, I have provided the policy governance outline with 5 items. Everything is in compliance, and we've provided several attachments for evidence of that compliance. May I summarize the policy governance compliance for you tonight?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So this is financial planning and budgeting 1000.2.4. The policy statement is financial planning for any fiscal year or the remaining part of any fiscal year will not deviate materially from board of directors' ends, goals, priorities, risk, fiscal jeopardy, or fail to be derived from multi-year considerations. And then goes on to outline the 5 items that the superintendent will protect against. And we have provided the evidence of compliance for each of those items. I don't have any changes to this policy, but I'm curious if anybody has any questions about the items or the evidence provided.
Any questions or comments from the board? All right, seeing none, this will go to survey. I'm not seeing when the survey will come out. Am I missing that in here? Barb, will you let us know when the survey comes out?
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, it'll be, I'll send it out tomorrow, and it'll be due back by the 16th for approval at the 21st board meeting on March 21st.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda are policy governance, review of board policies. We have 2 policies to review. 1000.3.4, board president's role. I will ask for a board member volunteer to review this policy.
Okay, board president's role. The president of the board of directors provides leadership to the board, ensures the integrity of the board's process, exercises interpretive responsibilities, and normally serves as the board's official spokesperson. Accordingly, the board president's job is to assure that the board's conduct is consistent with its own rules and those legitimately imposed upon it from outside the district. Accordingly, and I'll just summarize those 4 sections. Meeting discussion content will be on the issues which, according to board policy, clearly belong to the board to decide. Discussion of incidental information that is for neither monitoring performance nor board decisions will be minimized. Deliberation will be fair, open, and thorough, but also timely, orderly, and kept to the point. When requested, board meetings will include opportunity for board self-assessment. Part 2, and if you could scroll down a little more. Okay, the authority of the board president consists of making decisions that are consistent with board policies on governance process and board superintendent linkage. Employment or termination of a superintendent, instances where the board specifically delegates portions of the authority to others. The board is authorized to use any reasonable interpretation of the provisions in these policies. The president is empowered to conduct board meetings with all of the commonly accepted power of that position. The board president has no authority to make decisions about policies created by the board within ends, goals, and executive limitations, policy areas. We went down too fast. Okay. Therefore, the board president has no authority as an individual board member to supervise or direct the superintendent. The board president will usually represent the board to outside parties in announcing board stated positions and in stating chair decisions and interpretations within the areas of authority. The board president may delegate this authority, but remains accountable for its use. Other duties of the president are listed below. The duties may be delegated as desired by the president. Executing all documents authorized by the board and on behalf of the board and in concert with the superintendent, developing proposed board meeting agendas. Vice President. The Vice President shall preside at board meetings in the absence of the President and shall perform all of the other duties of the President in case of his or her absence. Okay, that pretty much summarizes that.
Thank you, Norm.
Sure.
Any comments or suggestions for revision on board policy 1000.3.4?
I'm comfortable with it as it is.
Okay, we will, I think this goes to SurveyMonkey as well. Is that right, Barb? So this will go to survey tomorrow, I assume. Is it due back the same day, the 16th?
Yes, due back the 16th, and it'll go on the 21st meeting.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is review of board policy 1000.3.5, board members code of conduct. The link there did not work for me. I put in the chat a direct link to the board, to the district policies page. So Raymond or Ryan, if one of you would please volunteer to review our board members code of conduct 1000.3.5.
I have it pulled up if you'd like me to.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. The Board of Directors commits itself and its members to ethical, businesslike, and lawful conduct, including proper use of authority and appropriate decorum. It has the right to expect adherence to this code of conduct. The board is mindful that actions of board members, even outside of official board business, reflect on the board and the district as a whole. Board members will represent the interests of the entire community. This accountability to the whole district supersedes any conflicting loyalty a member may have to other advocacy or interest groups, loyalty based upon membership on other boards or staffs, conflicts based upon the personal interests of any board member who is also a parent of a student in the district, or conflicts based upon being a relative of an employee of the district. Members must avoid conflicts of interest with respect to their fiduciary responsibility. There will be no self-dealing or business conducted by a member with the district except to the extent expressly permitted by law and appropriately disclosed. As required by Washington state law, members will annually disclose to the Public Disclosure Commission their involvements with other organizations, vendors, or with any associations. When the board is to decide upon an issue about which a member has an unavoidable conflict of interest, that member shall absent herself or himself without comment from not only the vote, but also from the deliberation. When the board is to decide upon an issue about which a member has an outside association that is not clearly an unavoidable conflict of interest as described in 2.2, but that might cause question of a conflict, that member will disclose to the whole board, which will determine whether or not the member shall absent herself, himself, as described above. Board members will not use their board position to obtain employment in the organization for themselves, family members, or close associates. Should a board member apply for employment, she or he must first resign from the board. Board members may not attempt to exercise individual authority over the organization. Members' interaction with the superintendent or with staff must recognize the lack of authority vested in individuals except when explicitly board authorized. Members will not give personal direction to any part of the operational organization or assume personal responsibility for resolving operational problems or complaints. Members' interaction with the public, press, or other entities must recognize the same limitation and the inability of any board member but the president or designee to speak for the board except to repeat explicitly stated board decisions. Except for participation in board deliberation about whether the superintendent has achieved any reasonable interpretation of board policy, members will not publicly express individual negative judgments of performance of the superintendent or employees of the superintendent/district. Members will respect the confidentiality appropriate to issues of a sensitive nature and other matters that may comprise the integrity or legal standing of the board and district. Materials shared or notes taken within executive and closed sessions will not be removed from the session. Executive and closed sessions are confidential. Discussions held in executive and closed sessions are not to be discussed with anyone else other than board members, superintendent, and legal counsel. To build trust among members and to ensure an environment conducive to effective governance, individual members will focus on issues rather than personalities, support decisions of the full board, exercise honesty in all written and interpersonal interaction, never intentionally misleading or misinforming one another, criticize privately, praise publicly, make every reasonable effort to protect the integrity and promote the positive image of the district and one another, never embarrass each other or the district, maintain an effort to foster unity and harmony within the board, abide by their own rules and policies, grow as a board member by attending workshops and other types of in-service training, not surprise the superintendent or board members at board meetings or public venues with hidden agendas or unexpected topics.
Thank you, Ryan. That is a long policy to review. Any comments or suggestions for revisions of this policy? All right, seeing none, this will move forward to the evaluation process with surveys going out on March 8th, and it will be due by March 16th for review at the March 21st meeting. Next item on the agenda is continues work on policy governance, discussion of board policies. These policies have been reviewed and surveys have gone out, so we are reviewing the results of the survey. First is policy 1000.3.2 board job description. Upon review of this policy, looks like generally there's acceptance that the board is compliant or making sufficient progress. And there were some comments on this as well. Comment on question 8, if the board is not in strict compliance with policies as stated, what evidence demonstrates the board is not in compliance, personal opinion, community feedback. Does the board member that made that comment, would they like to expand? And on question 9, comment in what ways, question 9 is in what ways could the board improve its process to be in full compliance? Comment was increase efficiency of board meeting time, increased connectivity with community, and visibility at organizations and functions. Does that the board member who made that comment wish to expand? Yes, I'm curious about increased efficiency of board meeting time. What does that mean? Or maybe provide some examples or suggestions of what that should look like.
I spoke to that particular question just in reference to the length of our meetings, the amount of time that's delegated to specific items, and you know, the reality of how much we have to go through. At our January board retreat, it was made very clear that there was a desire for more feedback on these forms. So I felt like it was worth being honest and open on that form. I'm probably in the minority of the opinion about our time management, but it was something that coming from the private sector, I felt should probably be tossed out there. is certainly one of the things that I think influences whether or not people are willing to be involved or connected in the district. And it's, I just think in general terms, a good goal we should all strive towards.
Thank you. And then I guess I assume that this is all in the same comment, Ryan, increased connectivity with community and visibility at organizations and functions. I guess that's pretty self-explanatory. Anything else that you want to add to those comments?
I would like to just dovetail a little on Ryan's comment, is that I think that sometimes we might benefit from, in developing an agenda, assigning a time limit to how much we're going to discuss particular issues, because it seems to be, sometimes we do drag on an awfully long time, sometimes on issues that could be resolved, I think, quicker, keeping in mind that sometimes you don't want to cut anybody off, but it does seem that some things just kind of go on way too long, and maybe they could be handled a little more efficiently. And that one thing that might, sometimes I've noticed in meetings that you fill up the time you're given. And sometimes if we set a time limit and we aim to stay within that time limit, it might make for more efficient meetings, and it might make for keeping our comments terse and not expanding all the time. So it's just something to consider in how we set up an agenda.
We may consider just having a limit, right? A 2-hour, 3-hour meeting, and then that would help us move right through the agenda more efficiently. So.
Yeah, I think there's something to say about that. Our meetings can get a little bit long, and that makes it challenging. I was glad, whenever that was, that we moved from Friday morning meetings to Monday afternoon meetings, because that certainly restricted the amount of time that cuts into the workday, at least for the board members. So definitely would not be opposed to that. We can, because I was going to suggest we kind of develop a plan around how we handle future meetings at the next board retreat, but I guess that won't be until August. This could be a agenda item under items of board interest at the next meeting. I could see, potentially adding timelines or time limits for each component of the board meeting, not just the overall meeting time. We could also assign a timekeeper to keep us on track. I think that would be helpful as well. All right, how about we think, and we can add this, Barb, if we can add this to our next Monday meeting, items of board interest, and we can.
Okay, I'll put it on the 21st.
Okay. And other comment on question 10 is, what does the board need to learn to discuss? What does the board need to learn or discuss to comply with the policies more completely? Discuss the definition of community ownership. Do we want to do that now, or can we add that too? I think that's a good discussion for a board retreat. Heads nodding. So I don't know if you started a list yet, Barb, of next board retreat. I guess that's in August to be scheduled, right? We had to reschedule the one that had already been.
Right.
Okay. All right. Let's see. So we reviewed this policy. There's general consensus that we are in compliance or making sufficient progress. Per our board policy, we can review and approve in the same action. If you'd like to do that. So I would at this time entertain a motion to approve the rating report for policy 1000.3.2 board job description.
So moved.
Moved by Norm.
Second.
Seconded by Raymond. Is there any discussion? Barb, if you would call a roll vote, please.
Yes, Mr. Beckett,
Aye.
Mr. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next agenda item is review of the survey results of policy 1000.3.3 agenda planning. I think here also the board was generally agreed that the board is in compliant or making progress. There were a few comments. Oh, there's a yellow. What does the yellow mean? Board is not in compliance. All right, we have one board is not in compliance. Q2, the cycle will start with the board's development of its agenda for the next year. The annual planning will include consultation. One person said not in compliance. Consultation, I think that's community board development. That says not in compliance. Oh, it's below.
And if I could speak to that, Graciela, it seemed to me when I was going through this, there was no option for anything other than is compliant or isn't compliant.
Okay.
So if you put comments in, and maybe I was doing it wrong, but it seemed like if I added comments, that was just the way it came up.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's a reason that that would be different, or again, if it's user error.
Okay. So I guess let's look at the comments that might help us navigate how we move forward. So for last year, and then to me, this would seem ongoing. This is question 1, the annual planning cycle. The second comment here, to me, this work seemed ongoing. I was not aware of wrapping it up tied to the October date. So if I'm not recalling the dates that our annual calendar is finalized, but know that there is an annual calendar that is put out. We used to review our annual board calendar that includes meetings and training opportunities and community events during items of board interest each year, and we've moved away from that. I think the group would probably benefit from looking at that, having a regular review of that board calendar. Again, so that could be an option that we do. Does the person who made the comment around not being aware that it wrapped up, agenda planning wrapped up at some point in the year? Okay. Let's see. And the next comment is on Q4. If the board is not in strict compliance with policies, what evidence demonstrates the board is not in compliance? I'm unaware of consultations as per 2.1 or trainings as per 2.2. If they are in fact happening, then I will stand corrected. So 2.1 is consultation with selected groups in the community or other methods of getting community ownership input will be determined and arranged in the first quarter to be held in the balance of the year. You know, we have, I think it's 2 meetings with business community, a business community group, and 2 with the faith community. Is that, Superintendent Green, is that frequency correct? And are there any groups that I'm not remembering? And those are scheduled and set ahead of time, I know.
With what frequency? Say that again.
I think it was twice a year for the faith community and twice a year for the business community. And there's a education community as well. That we
the faith-based community is, I think they're both more frequent. Barb, do you have those numbers? I want to say the faith-based community is at least quarterly.
Okay.
The business has been, that's been at least 3 times, if not quarterly. So it's more than twice. And then the other entity you mentioned?
I think higher education.
No, higher education has not been consistent, has not been a reoccurring.
Okay. Was somebody going to say something? So I know that those meetings are part of the annual agenda planning for the year.
But those are superintendent groups, right? Not board groups, because I don't think we get any reports from those groups, any feedback. And that feedback, I don't know if it's, we use that for policy, or policy governance approach. So I think there might be a disconnect.
And
If what's that?
That's a good point, Raymond. And I think the only groups that are consistently, with the board would be the example that I gave of Union Gap and our meetings with them, the previous meetings that had happened with City Council. I think the furthest you could go in considering the faith-based or the business partners would be that we have typically at least 2 board members attend, and they at times do share out with the board. I know that has happened, but as far as information policy, I have not seen that considered. So.
And I know in the past there were a formal community engagement plan in place, and the feedback that this predates my time on the board, I think, and so I'm recalling previous information shared by Martha. The feedback received perhaps was not the most robust, and so there was movement away from those scheduled engagement meetings and moved towards looking at other opportunities for engagement. And part of that included board members attending the groups that we just talked about, the Migrant Talk meeting and other community meetings that we might be a part of. I know this is a conversation each year. Raymond, are you interested in putting together a proposal of what you think the board should do as a discussion point moving forward? This could also be an agenda item at an upcoming retreat.
Well, I think I would have to think about it a little bit, but some important things that we'll be processing here in the future, the budget, that could be one. Why don't we get feedback from the community? The equity audit, perhaps we can get some feedback from our community on what they're thinking about that, about the results of the report. So those are just a couple of examples that we could have that community engagement piece, because we really aren't practicing that, and it's part of our governance policy model as to really reflect the values, the thoughts, opinions of stakeholders. And I personally feel that I could do a better job in that. And I know that over the course of the last 2 years during the pandemic, it was harder to get in contact and have those type of meetings, but I think we can move towards that again and have regular contact with various groups in our community, our stakeholders. So I don't know if I gave you a direct answer or not, but.
But one place we do that we may not be considering is that we do get in the school climate surveys that we do with students and staff and parents. Don't we get parent survey information every year from that group? I think it's the EEC surveys or ECE or whatever the acronym is. But isn't that part of the feedback that we get on school climate stuff? Is there's a component there for parents to participate in that survey, and don't we get participation from parents?
I think there's a number of ways that the board gets information that the board then uses to inform decisions and strategies. But you're right in that there isn't a formal community outreach plan. So that's something that's interesting. I think we previously talked about, I'm trying to remember what that cadence was, or the procedure was to take a month to develop a plan. So Raymond, is that something that you have some interest in maybe proposing a formal strategy in increasing the board's opportunities for community engagement.
Yeah, but you know, right now I just don't have the time to put together a strategy like that, like I'm thinking you're saying, but I think I just know that we need to do more of the engagement with our stakeholders.
So is that an agenda item we want to include on the next retreat? We want to.
That would be fine. That would be good.
Okay. The other board members agree on adding that community engagement topic to a future retreat agenda?
Sure, that sounds fine.
All right, and then in Q5, in what ways could the board improve its process to be in full compliance? The response was board strategy to comply with policy. I'm not sure I understand what that means. Is that what we just talked about? I don't know if that was your comment, Raymond.
No, that wasn't.
Okay. Any other comments on that? I'm not sure what we're trying to say with that comment. Board strategy to comply with policy as a response to question 5. In what ways could the board improve its process to be in full compliance?
I think we're on the same vein as the last one. I think if we had it to the retreat agenda whenever we have a retreat in the future, that would be a good opportunity to discuss that.
Okay. And is that, Ryan, is that specifically about community engagement, or was that a general?
Yeah, I think that's a community engagement area. I think there's a certain reality to what the board is doing, and maybe we aren't aware of what the other board members are doing as far as who they're connected with. And if we don't have that connectivity with ourselves to understand what feedback we're getting in our community, then that's getting lost and isn't being used for the collective whole. So I think if we discuss this at a board retreat, we might get a better picture of what it really looks like and how much of an improvement, if any, really needs to happen.
Okay. So the overall results, most board members say that we are in compliance, and there were a couple that said not in compliance. After this discussion, are we comfortable with moving forward and approving this board rating report, or do we want to kick this to the next meeting to for approval or processing? I guess we could decide not to approve it.
Knowing that we're going to discuss these items in the future, I think we should move to approve it.
I will now entertain a motion that the board approves the rating report for policy 1000.3.3 agenda planning.
So moved.
Second by Norm. Is there any discussion? Rob, will you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Beckett?
Aye.
Mr. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Navarro Jr.?
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next are a series of 3 approvals. The first is confirm permission to purchase PK to 12 balance assessment management systems. Dr. Rodriguez. If you want to kick this
Thank
off.
you, Vice President Villanueva. Members of the board, I'm here tonight to just seek approval for the final payment for Illuminate Balanced Assessment System. The total cost is $320,000. I presented to you this in the fall, and then we needed to complete an RFP process. That process is now completed, so this is our final step in this particular purchase. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Can you review what this is? I don't recall.
Sure. The Illuminate Balanced Assessment System is really the backbone assessment system that allows us to track data by school, by subgroup, by grade, by content area, gives us easily accessible assessment data for our students. In addition, it will also have information of a social emotional learning standpoint for us to really be able to track our students as we complete social emotional learning screeners, as well as screeners in areas specifically of reading and mathematics. So it is the data that helps us to improve instruction more quickly by ensuring that we have that data housed in a site that's accessible to staff throughout the system.
Any questions? Okay, I will enter. Is this a motion? It just says confirm permission here. It is. I will entertain a motion to confirm permission to purchase PK-12 balance assessment management system.
So moved.
Moved by Norm,
Second.
second by Raymond. Is there any discussion? All right, Barb, will you do roll call vote, please?
Mr. Beckett,
Aye.
Mr. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next item is approval of resolution 06.21.22, emergency waiver of high school graduation credits. Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Vice President Villanueva and members of the board. I'm here seeking your approval of resolution number 06.21.22, emergency waiver of high school graduation credits. We're seeking that the board of directors approves this. It is allowing our students in the graduating classes that have already come through 2020, 2021, as well as the current graduating class of 2022. It allows them 2 additional credits that can be waived as part of their graduation plan due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency. We are also asking in the resolution that should that be extended to future graduating classes, that would also be permitted. This is done typically almost on an annual basis from the State Board of Education. But last year they did allow us through some changes in Washington Administrative Code to allow for this for class of 2021 as well as 2022. Prior to that, it was done for the class of 2020. So this will bring our current operating policy around graduation requirements and waivers up to date in Yakima. Happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Rodriguez, are there any, does this allow for any credit to be waived, or there's some credits that would not be allowed to be waived?
So the emergency waiver plan allows for up to 2 credits to be waived. They can be elective or core credits. Students can waive no more than 1 credit in a core academic area. So for example, they might choose to waive 1 credit of English language arts, 1 credit of math under the 2 credits that are permissible under this COVID language. Prior to that, we have always permitted for students to have 2 credits of electives to be waived. That's longstanding graduation policy, both in our district and across the state. We have that ability to do that. So currently our graduation requirements are 24 credits. We had a previous up to 2 credits of electives that could be waived. This increases it by an additional 2 credits, which can be core or elective for a maximum waiver of 4 credits. So all students have to graduate with a minimum of 20 credits at this time.
And you said this also aligns with state law?
Yes, and it's listed in the resolution information, but this is under WAC 180-111, and that is written by State Board of Education. So the state legislature gave the State Board of Education authority to update these rules. They did so last year in the spring, and it applied to last year's graduating class as well as the current graduating class.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the impact of waiving core courses in terms of the college admissions process. I don't know if we have any data or any information regarding past classes that have graduated and applied, and maybe we're missing some general education requirements.
The vast majority of students typically would waive elective credits and not core credits, but certainly in the last couple of years, we have had students who needed to waive core credits just due to the nature of virtual learning and the pandemic impacts to them individually and in their families as well. I do not believe we've had significant impact to students being able to access, but that is part of the information that is shared with students and their families at the time that they choose to waive. They are told a variety of pieces of information which are listed out in the WAC. They're also on our waiver form, and the high school counselors work with students and their families to make sure they understand that there could be impacts to college and university admissions, could be other impacts to career areas. Again, it's very individualized for students. So that is part of the waiver process, is that they have to meet with the high school counselor and talk through the pros and cons of selecting to use the waiver language.
Also, there's something interesting, and I'm not trying to understand it. Say the district, this is way at the bottom, let it be further resolved, that the district will ensure equity in administering the emergency waiver. So I'm just wondering what does that really mean in terms of this request?
Sure. So there is language from the State Board of Education that provides guidance to school districts around how the waiver is to be used. And we are obligated when students are using this, that we track the data. So we can track by subgroup and student population groups. So by different ethnicity groups, by free reduced lunch versus not free reduced lunch, by English language learner versus not English language learner, migrant versus non-migrant students. So we track the credits, the number of credits, and then are they core or elective credits? And we track it and break it out by all of those subgroups so that if there are discrepancies, we can put additional parameters in place to address them. So we're obligated to collect that data and take a look at it from an equity standpoint to ensure that we're not having a particular subgroup of students access this waiver at a rate higher than other subgroups in our district.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? I will entertain a motion that the Board of Directors approve Resolution 06.19.20, emergency waiver of high school graduation credits.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ryan, second by Norm. Is there any discussion? Barb, would you do roll call vote, please?
Mr. Beckett?
Aye.
Mr. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Navarro Jr.?
Aye.
And Vice President Villanueva?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Next item is approval for Superintendent Green to travel to the National Migrant Conference. Dr. Green.
Yes, thank you. And I'm so grateful that Dr. Ellis has decided to stay the remainder of this meeting because as to preface this request, the request of action is approval for me to travel to San Antonio over April 6th to 10th to attend the National Migrant Conference. This is actually to attend with Dr. Ellis and many members from her team. I think we're looking at a group of around 12 to 13, if memory serves, and she's nodding. It does align with our strategic plan, and the fiscal impact would be $3,471.70. The background information is, of course, that this program updates. This opportunity is to connect more with issues and policies that will impact our current practices and help us meet guidelines with the federal government. I would also add that given my background and lack of knowledge in the area of migrant education, that certainly having Dr. Ellis here is a godsend, but also knowing that that is a part of my accountability, it is paramount for me to attend with the team, learn with the team, and then help fulfill those goals and remove any barriers to achievement for our migrant students. So then the request is to approve the travel April 6th through 10th.
Any questions or comments from the board? All right, I will entertain a motion. The Board of Directors approves travel for Superintendent Green to San Antonio, Texas over April 6th to 10, 2022 to attend the National Migrant Conference.
So moved.
Second.
Norm, second by Ryan. Is there any discussion? Barb, will you conduct a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Beckett,
Aye.
Mr. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
We have arrived at the end of our agenda. Is there a need for executive session?
There is not a need this evening for executive session.
All right. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Oh, Superintendent Green.
Yes, I would just thank you. I just in closing, I'd just like to thank all of those in attendance, and certainly we have 4 viewers that stayed with us. As I look out, I see Kirsten Fitterer, and she's bundled up in a jacket, so I know that she is recovering from an illness. And I know that she is not the first person to do this in this setting. So thank you for being here. I know that of the 4 people watching, I would bet my house that one of them is named Martha Rice. So I would like to thank her for being an observer during this time, and just recognizing the commitment of people like Andy Gonzalez and being here, and Jill Brumley staying, and of course the people who we can see. And I won't go into everybody's names, but I think it speaks very highly of the district. And I do look forward to the time that we're back in session and we can see everybody in 3-dimensional viewing.
Thank you. I did have those comments. I appreciate everyone's support of the board, and certainly our students, obviously the reason why we're all here. And shout out to Martha. We miss you, and count free to come back. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you. And members of the cabinet, there's a quick meeting afterwards if you just check on.